Revenge office stories. This is why women can't lead. The words just hung there in the boardroom, dripping with a smug, polished kind of sexism. My boss, Caleb, leaned back in his big leather chair, a smirk on his lips, while his cronies around the table let out this wave of gross, supportive laughter. I had just told them, with a real sense of pride, I might add, that I'd officially finished my Master of Business Administration, a degree I had poured 2 years of nights and weekends into, and he was publicly shaming me for it. You could feel the tension in the room. Across the table, our HR rep, Sharon, suddenly found her own lap to be the most fascinating thing in the entire world. Her looking away was a knife twisting in my back. The others, the same guys who were praising my work 5 minutes ago, were now either chuckling along or studying the ceiling tiles like their lives depended on it. In that one burning moment, I was completely alone. But as the laughter washed over me, something strange happened. The hot flash of humiliation was instantly replaced by this icy calm. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I got a plan. Right there, under the fluorescent lights of my own public execution, I made a silent promise to myself. He thought my ambition was a joke. Fine. I would make his entire career the punchline. This is the story of how I became the chief operating officer of his biggest competitor and used the very ambition he mocked to uncover a massive fraud that led to his spectacular and totally deserved downfall. To really get the depth of Caleb's arrogance, you have to know where I started. Before the MBA, before all this, I was a senior project manager at Sterling Financial, a respectable, if a little stuffy, firm. And I wasn't just good at my job, I was exceptional. I lived for my projects. 4-5 years straight, I was one of the highest performing managers they had. I was the person they handed the impossible tasks to. Remember Project Titan? That was me. It was a massive, company-wide systems overhaul that 2 other managers had already failed at. It was a total mess of old software, departments fighting for territory, and a budget that was bleeding out. I took it, worked 16-hour days for 6 months, untangled the whole thing, and launched it on time and 10% under budget. The project saved the company about $4 million in its first year. My name was on the memo, sure, but Caleb took all the credit in the shareholder meeting. Then there was the Omega Protocol. I designed it from scratch after I noticed we were losing clients in a key sector. I built the strategy, created the workflows, and personally trained the teams. Within a year, we stopped the bleeding and boosted client retention by 30%. I got a small bonus. Caleb got promoted to vice president, and that was the pattern, right? I wasn't just an employee. I was the engine powering Caleb's career. I did the work, he took the glory. For a while, I just told myself that's how the game is played. Keep your head down, get results, and eventually the work will have to speak for itself. Caleb was a classic corporate peacock. Expensive suits, a perfect golf swing, and this incredible talent for repeating your ideas back to the room like he'd just had a stroke of genius. The sexism wasn't always obvious, not at first. It was more like 1,000 tiny paper cuts. In meetings, I'd present an idea, and he'd give a non-committal nod. 10 minutes later, a male colleague would rephrase my exact point, and Caleb would praise his sharp, outside-the-box thinking. He'd make jokes about women being too emotional for the trading floor. He'd call me kiddo in front of clients, even though I was in my 30s and managing multi-million-dollar projects. I could see the glass ceiling he was building over my head, brick by misogynistic brick. I knew that no matter how hard I worked, in his eyes, my gender was a permanent roadblock to real leadership. That's why I went for my MBA. It wasn't just about a piece of paper, it was a strategy. I needed an arsenal of skills that men like Caleb couldn't ignore or dismiss. So, I enrolled in a top executive MBA program. For 2 years, my life was just work, study, sleep, repeat. I'd leave the office after a 10-hour day, go to a 3-hour class, then come home and study until 2 a.m. Weekends were gone, eaten up by team projects and papers. I poured my own money, my time, and all my energy into it, all while still hitting my targets at work and making Caleb look good. He started to notice, though. As my confidence grew, his passive aggressiveness got sharper. He'd dump impossible, last-minute tasks on my desk on Friday afternoons, knowing I had class. He started leaving me out of high-level strategy meetings I used to be essential to. He'd make snide comments about my little school project, always just loud enough for others to hear. "Don't get too many big ideas in your head," he once told me with a fake smile. It felt like I was leading a double life. In my MBA classes, I was surrounded by brilliant people who respected my ideas. I was debating strategy with future CEOs. My professors saw me as a leader. Then I'd walk into the office on Monday and turn back into Kiddo, a useful but second-tier player in Caleb's world. That's when I started a file on my personal laptop, a simple, password-protected document I called the log. Every snide comment, every stolen idea, every meeting I was shut out of, I wrote it all down. Date, time, what was said, who was there. At the time, it wasn't a plan for revenge. It was an insurance policy, a record to prove I wasn't crazy. It was a testament to the slow-burn anger building up inside me. I didn't know it then, but that log would become the foundation for everything. The day it all blew up was a Tuesday. It was the big quarterly review in the main boardroom with the CEO and the whole executive team. I was there to present the final results of Project Chimera, another one of Caleb's impossible projects that I'd managed to pull off. It was a huge success, a 15% boost in efficiency, projected to save the company over $5 million a year. I nailed the presentation. I was calm, confident, and had all the data to back it up. When I finished, you could hear impressed murmurs around the room. Even the CEO, who was usually pretty stoic, cracked a smile and nodded. "Excellent work," he said. "Truly impressive." I was glowing. This was it, the kind of public win he couldn't just steal. Riding that high, I made a split-second decision. I wanted them to see I was preparing for the next level. "Thank you, sir," I said, my voice steady. And on a personal note, I'm also very proud to share that as of last week, I have officially completed my Master of Business Administration. The room went quiet. The CEO opened his mouth to say something, but Caleb cut him off with a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't friendly, it was pure mockery. He looked around the table at his buddies, a cruel glint in his eyes, and then he said it, the line that changed everything. "An MBA? How cute," he started, his voice just dripping with condescension. He waved a hand in my direction. "This is why women can't lead. They're always trying to collect gold stars and certificates instead of just doing the work." He looked right at me, his face a mask of smugness. "No piece of paper is going to make you a leader. Some people have it, some people don't." The message was crystal clear. I didn't have it. The laughter started. First a few nervous chuckles, then getting louder as his cronies followed his lead. It felt like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. I glanced at the CEO, who now just looked uncomfortable but said nothing. I looked at Sharon in HR, who was suddenly scribbling furiously on her notepad, refusing to meet my eyes. Her silence was the loudest sound in the room. It was the sound of the company betraying me. They were all in on it. With their laughter and their silence, they were all agreeing with him. All my work, my sacrifices, my wins, all of it was reduced to a punchline in a sexist joke. The humiliation was absolute, and it was the single greatest gift Caleb ever gave me, because in that moment, the anger didn't boil over. It froze into something hard, clear, and sharp. I lifted my chin, looked Caleb right in the eye, and gave him a small, tight smile. "Thank you for your perspective, Caleb," I said, my voice completely steady. As I walked out of that boardroom, the laughter still echoing behind me, the old me died. The me who kept her head down and hoped her work would be enough. A new me was born, a me who now understood the real rules of the game. It wasn't about working hard. It was about winning. And I was going to burn his entire kingdom to the ground. If you think Caleb is about to get what's coming to him, do me a favor and smash that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you are not going to want to miss the ending. I went back to my desk, moving slowly and deliberately. I sat down, took a deep breath, and all the chaos inside me just sharpened into a single point of focus. Anger is hot and messy. What I felt was cold. It was the clear, calculating focus of a strategist staring at a chessboard. Caleb had just shown his hand. He saw me as harmless, an ambitious girl playing dress-up. He was underestimating me, and that was going to be his fatal mistake. That night, I didn't rage. I opened my personal laptop and created a new encrypted folder called Project Phoenix. I moved my log of his behavior into it. Then I added a detailed, time-stamped account of the boardroom meeting with exact quotes and a list of everyone who was there. This wasn't just insurance anymore. It was an arsenal. My whole attitude at work changed, but in a way no one could see. On the outside, I was the perfect employee, polite, efficient, a team player. I smiled at Caleb in the hall. I hit all my deadlines. But on the inside, I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a spy in enemy territory. I started paying attention to everything. The whispers, the alliances, the way money and power really move through the firm. My first move was to look outward. My MBA and resume were now top tier. I quietly started applying for senior leadership jobs, but I was picky. I didn't just want a new job, I wanted a launch pad. I targeted one company in particular, Innovate Financial. They were Sterling's biggest rival, aggressive, tech-savvy, and known for a much better corporate culture. They were already eating Sterling's lunch in the market, and I wanted to be the one to serve them the main course. While I was interviewing with Innovate, I turned my attention back to Caleb. His weakness was his ego. He thought he was smarter than everyone, which probably meant he was careless. I just needed to find out where. The opportunity came from a project he assigned me himself. It was a soul-crushing data audit, prepping our systems for new regulations. He probably gave it to me as a punishment, a way to bury me in spreadsheets. He thought he was giving me busy work. He had no idea he was handing me the keys to his entire crooked kingdom. The audit gave me high-level access to transaction logs and client data from all over the company. As I was working through it, I noticed a strange pattern. It was all centered around one huge client portfolio, the Sterling account. This was a legacy client worth over $100 million, and Caleb was managing it directly. That was a huge red flag. A VP shouldn't be involved in the day-to-day of a single client, no matter how big. One of my MBA courses was on forensic accounting. My professor, a former SEC investigator, always said, "Fraud leaves a trail. You just have to know how to read the patterns." So, late at night on my own time, I started digging into the Sterling account's transaction history, and I found the patterns. There were huge consulting and advisory fees being paid out every single month, but they weren't going to a real consulting firm. They were going to a few small, shady LLCs with generic names like Strategic Solutions Group. A quick search showed these were just shell corporations. No websites, no employees, just P.O. box addresses. I dug deeper. The audit gave me access to the payment authorizations. Every single one of these shady payments was personally approved by Caleb, often overriding the normal compliance rules. He was using his authority to push them through without anyone looking too closely. This was it. This was his dirty secret. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place when I used a database from my MBA alumni network to look up who owned those shell companies. They all traced back to a single holding company owned by Caleb's brother-in-law. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just messy. This was a scheme, a long-running, sophisticated one. Caleb was literally stealing from his own client, disguising it as business expenses and laundering the money through his family. The arrogance was stunning. He felt so untouchable he was running a criminal operation right under the company's nose. For the next 3 weeks, I led a double life. By day, I was the diligent project manager. By night, I was a forensic investigator building my case. I downloaded every incriminating transaction, every email, every internal doc showing he was the sole manager of that account. I cross-referenced everything, creating a complete, undeniable file of his fraud. It was a detailed roadmap of his greed. Every piece of evidence was another nail in his professional coffin. Just as I was finishing the dossier, I got the call. It was the CEO of Innovate Financial. The final interviews had gone perfectly. They weren't just offering me a job. They were offering me the position of Chief Operating Officer, second in command. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in months, I let myself smile. A real, genuine smile. Everything was in place. Project Phoenix was ready. My resignation was a quiet masterpiece of satisfaction. I walked into Caleb's office and handed him my letter. He barely looked at it, that smug smirk already on his face. Well, well, he said, leaning back. Decided that MBA didn't prepare you for the big leagues after all? Found a nice little firm that's a better fit for your temperament. I just smiled. A calm, knowing smile that I could see made him uneasy. Something like that, I replied. I've accepted a role that's a much better fit for my qualifications. My last day is in 2 weeks. He was so arrogant, he didn't even ask where I was going. In his mind, I was just some woman who couldn't take the heat and was running away. He had no clue he was talking to the incoming COO of his biggest rival. Those 2 weeks were surreal. I did a perfect handover, creating detailed files for my projects, all while knowing the company's foundations were rotten. Walking out of Sterling Financial for the last time felt like shedding an old skin. I didn't look back. My first 90 days as COO at Innovate were a blur. The company was everything Sterling wasn't. Dynamic, smart, and hungry. My new CEO actually valued my ideas. My MBA wasn't a joke here. It was a recognized asset. I dove into my work, overseeing operations and strategy. For the first time, I felt seen and valued for my mind. But I hadn't forgotten about the past. My dossier on Caleb sat on an encrypted drive in my home office, a ticking time bomb. It was time to light the fuse. The plan had to be flawless and completely untraceable. Revenge is a dish best served cold and also anonymously. My first move was public. As COO, I was in charge of competitive analysis and client acquisition. And what was the biggest, most vulnerable target at our competitor? The Sterling account. I knew Caleb was too busy stealing from the account to actually manage it properly. I put my best team at Innovate on it. We built a data-driven pitch for the account's board. We didn't just offer a better price. We offered them transparency, security, and tech-enabled compliance. I'd basically designed a presentation that showed them all the ways a firm like Sterling could fail them, the very gaps Caleb was exploiting, without ever saying the word fraud. I was selling them the cure to a disease they didn't even know they had. The second move was secret and final. Using an anonymous email service and a VPN, I sent 2 packages. The first went to the chairman of the board and the head of internal audit at Sterling Financial. The subject line was simple, urgent, a matter of fiduciary duty. The email had a short summary of the fraud and the full, undeniable dossier attached. The sheer detail of the evidence made it impossible to ignore. The second package went to the enforcement division of the main financial regulator. This was the masterstroke. An internal investigation could be buried. An official regulatory inquiry, based on a tip this detailed, could not. It would force their hand. I hit send, and just like that, the fuse was lit. All I had to do was wait for the explosion. The fallout was faster than I ever could have imagined. The anonymous tip to the regulators was like a lightning strike. Within days, Sterling Financial got a formal notice of an inquiry. The board, now in a full-blown panic and holding my dossier, had to act. They immediately hired external forensic accountants, the expensive, ruthless kind. Caleb was completely blindsided. He showed up to work one morning and his access card didn't work. He was met in the lobby by HR, the same Sharon who'd stared at her lap, and 2 lawyers. He was escorted to a conference room, suspended, and told to hand over all company property. The king of the castle was frog-marched out of the building in front of everyone. The humiliation must have been exquisite. The investigation was a total bloodbath. The accountants used my dossier as a roadmap and confirmed every single detail. The evidence was so overwhelming that the investigation moved with shocking speed. Caleb was fired for cause, for gross financial misconduct. The official press release was vague, but the whole industry knew the real story. Fraud. Embezzlement. His name was toxic. No one would touch him. He was also facing potential criminal charges, with the threat of fines and even jail time hanging over him. The reputation he'd built by stepping on people was gone. And then came the final, most beautiful part. The board of the Sterling account, horrified that they'd been a victim of fraud from their own account manager, immediately fired Sterling Financial. Losing a $120 million account sent shockwaves through the already damaged company. They needed to move their money. Fast. And who did they call? Me. The new COO of Innovate Financial, who had just presented them with a brilliant vision of transparency and integrity. We won the account. It was the largest client acquisition in my company's history. Caleb's greatest crime led directly to my greatest victory. The irony was delicious. The fallout for Sterling Financial was devastating. The loss of their flagship client, on top of the scandal, was a body blow they couldn't just shake off. It triggered massive layoffs and a painful corporate restructuring just to stay afloat. They had to break the lease on several floors of their fancy office, including the entire executive wing. Caleb's corner office, where he had laughed at my ambition, was now empty, stripped down to bare concrete. Sometimes I think about that moment in the boardroom. Caleb didn't just laugh at my MBA. He laughed at the very idea that I could have ambition. He truly believed that as a woman, my job was to support, not to lead. His worldview was so small, he couldn't imagine me as an equal, let alone a threat. My revenge wasn't just about getting him fired. The revenge was in how I did it. I didn't file an HR complaint that would have gone nowhere. I used my brain. I used my work ethic. I used the very education he mocked to climb higher than he ever could. He used his power to steal. I used my power to deliver justice. Today, as the COO of Innovate Financial, I'm helping build the kind of company I always wanted to work for, where your performance is all that matters and ambition is something to be encouraged, not ridiculed. We've put in place the same kinds of tough compliance systems I used to catch Caleb, to make sure what happened there can never happen here. I'm proving every single day that the only thing that limits you is a lack of vision. Caleb's vision for me was tiny. My vision for myself was limitless. And in the end, my vision won. The world is full of Calebs. People who will try to put you in a box and define you by their own prejudices. They'll underestimate you and mock your ambition to protect their own fragile power. Don't let them. Use their disrespect as fuel. Use their underestimation as your camouflage. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep building your skills. The best revenge isn't sinking to their level. It's rising so high they become an insignificant speck below. That's my story, but now I want to hear yours. Have you ever had a boss like Caleb? Have you ever had to fight to be seen in your career, or plotted your own epic professional revenge? Share your stories in the comments. I read every single one. Thanks for watching.